So you're doing some 10 pulls on the current banner, and when you don't get a 5-star, you do get Sethos. Now what do you get with Sethos besides the newest 4-star in Genshin? Well, Sethos is a bow-wielding Electro user who has a new kind of mechanic to his kit, and this event weapon that's currently going on is like perfect for him, right? So in this video, we're gonna look at Sethos, we're gonna look at how his kit works, his skill, his burst, all of that. So first, we're gonna show off the current build of the Sethos that we are using in this video. This Sethos is level 20 out of 40 with 430 attack, 377 EM. His crit split is 62 over 133 with 136 ER. He also does have an Electro Goblet. For artifacts, for a weapon, he is running a level 1 Cloud Forged, which is the event weapon, which we'll talk more about that in that video, and then it'll have its own dedicated video as well. For artifacts, 4-piece Thundering Fury, C1, which just means that the crit rate of his Shadow Piercing shot, which we'll talk about that, is increased by 15%. Talents, 1-1-1. Let's go ahead and look at his passives. The first passive, when aiming, it will decrease his charge time by a certain amount of energy that he uses to decrease it for the second level. We're just gonna talk about this whenever we get to his actual charge attacks. The second one, he will gain an effect that increases the damage of his Shadow Piercing shot by his Elemental Mastery. So you do want to build up Elemental Mastery on Sethos. That's one of the reasons why this event bow is so good on him. So let's go look at his normal attacks, his charged attacks, his other charge attacks, his other charge attacks, his skill, and his burst. Okay, so his normal attacks are gonna be relatively normal for a bow character. It's gonna be kind of quick succession of physical damage when you're doing his normal attacks. His charged attacks are gonna have two different variants. You have the standard one where you hold it, it charges up, imbuing it with Electro, you release it, it hits the enemy with Electro. Now, if we hold down even longer, you're gonna see this very long second phase charge attack that does the Shadow Piercing arrow. This will shoot through your enemy and hit every enemy in its path. It will continue to go through, it will do a lot of damage, and it will have Electro Infusion. Now, once you fully charge this Shadow Piercing shot, Sethos cannot move. So you need to make sure that whenever you have it fully charged, you are then ready to fire it at the enemy, because whenever he turns his bow upwards, you can no longer move holding that shot. Now we're going to talk about his skill. And what his skill is going to do is that his skill is going to do an instance of Electro damage. He is going to retreat some, and it is going to give him energy, a lot of energy. But to get that energy, you have to cause an Electro reaction. Superconduct, Electro charged, aggravate. You have to make sure that you cause a reaction. Yes, you are still going to get energy from using it normally, but the amount of energy that you get is amplified to an insane amount upon doing that reaction. Now we're going to go back to his passive, right? And I'm going to have it up here on the screen. Using a certain amount of energy, you will use your elemental burst energy that you have accumulated. It will suck some of it out to then decrease the charge time of his Shadow Piercing arrow. So you need to build up energy and then use his charge attack to get the Shadow Piercing arrow charged like that. And you will see how quickly the charge of his Shadow Piercing goes. And you can do it multiple times. It has a maximum amount of energy that it can use, which is 20, to decrease the charge time of the Shadow Piercing arrow. So you're gonna notice that we're gonna do the Shadow Piercing arrow a couple times. I'm gonna just kind of throw it on repeat behind me. And you're gonna see that the first time that he does it, or once he has a little bit of energy, it's gonna take 0 time at all to do the Shadow Piercing charge attack. But then as the energy goes down, it is going to take longer and longer for that Shadow Piercing shot to charge up. So we do have to make sure that we are constantly doing reactions with his skill to get energy back, so that way you can do multiple Shadow Piercing shots. Something else I want to point out, he's level 20 with a level 1 weapon, and he's hitting 1800 with the Shadow Piercing shots. That is a fair good amount of damage, right? And that's not even on like aggravates, that's just hitting enemies. So I think that he's going to be really good. He's going to be really strong, especially with his event weapon that just is like tailored to work with him, right? So now we're going to look at his burst, and his burst is actually going to take away his ability to do charged attacks. However, it is going to make his normal attacks shadow piercing arrows or dusk arrows, they basically work the same way. So he does not do an instance of electro damage. Whenever he uses it, he just activates it. And as you can see, these arrows are shooting through enemies, hitting the other enemies behind them. So this still has the same effect of the shadow piercing arrows. The damage of this directly also scales with his elemental mastery. So again, the event weapon is really good with him. Running him in something like an aggravate spread team is going to be really, really good because of how his kit seems to work. So we do still want to use his burst, right? Because then we can do a ton of electro damage, a ton of these shots that go through the enemy. We're still going to do a lot of them. They're still going to be hitting pretty high damage too. Using his shadow piercing shots differently, using them whenever we may not have his burst, but you have to, from what I'm seeing, you have to learn how to balance the two, right? If you just use shadow piercing shots, cool, excellent. You're never really going to get to use his burst that much. If you're using his burst, then the shadow piercing shots are going to take forever to charge. So you kind of gotta figure out the best balance between the two. So now we're going to look at artifacts. For a beginner or early game artifact set, I'm going to say 4-piece Instructor. If not 4-piece Instructor, 2-piece Exile, 2-piece Instructor. Instructor is going to be giving a lot of EM, especially to him, and then also to your other party members. If you're like want to use his burst more often, then just do Exile as well. For the main stats, simply doing an EM stands more than attack, I would say. Electro Goblet, crit rate, crit damage circlet. For weapons, Cloud Forged, the event weapon that's going on right now, super, super good for him. Get it to R5, it's going to give him a ton of elemental mastery, and if you read the passive, it works exactly how you would want it to work with Sethos. Again, we're going to have a video talking just solely about this weapon, but this weapon is super, super good for him. It might even be considered his signature. Now, for some different teams, you can do I'm going to say you can do a lot with Sethos. I wonder how he would work in like a Sethos Chevy team. I don't think it would be as good. He might. It might be good with him. But I really think that he is designed to work in an aggravate and spread team because all of his stuff scales off of elemental mastery, which is really, really good for aggravate and spread teams. And it's still going to be easy to cause the reactions. You're going to be able to use somebody like Nahida. You're going to be able to use Dendra Resonance. I do wonder how he would do in a quick bloom team where you have somebody like Farina that is doing slow Hydro, because he seems like he would be able to, from me using him in this domain, his skill can trigger the Hyper Blooms. His charge shots, or the shots that go through the enemies, can still trigger the Hyper Blooms. And yes, there are some that I was not able to reliably trigger, but if I just shifted over, did another shot, I could have triggered it, or I just triggered it with his skill. So I'm not seeing a way that he would not be good in a quick bloom team. It'd be very interesting. Very, very interesting. I think that he was designed to work in an aggravate only team, like a quick and aggravate team, but a quick bloom team could also be really, really fun to do with him. I'm just watching the screen real quick and I'm seeing how reliably I can trigger the Hyper Blooms. I mean, the blooms are sitting there for 6 seconds. His skill cooldown, I think, is around 5 or 6 seconds. So he can even trigger every Hyper Bloom, every bloom as they're being created, if not with arrow shots, but also with his skill. So I think that it could definitely work in a team. It's going to be very, very interesting. Like, this Sethos is only level 20, so his Hyper Blooms are not hitting a ton, but I mean, 2,400, 2,500 on an aggravate with the quick charge shot, I can't even remember, the shadow piercing shot, is still pretty good for a level 20. That's not bad. I think he's going to do good. Genshin's been really good about balancing their recent 4-star characters. So I think that Sethos has a really good chance of doing really, really good. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, do be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or someone else will be sure to answer it, and I'll see you in the next one.